Hi, my name is Trish Murphy and I'm here to talk to you about my book, #Love 21st Century Relationships. And this talk is brought to you by Healthy Ireland at your library. So, I thought what I'd do is I'd ask questions and answer those questions, because sometimes it's the best way to talk about relationships. And then for further information, you can go to the book and maybe get some more insights and practical advice. So the first question is, how do I get love and at the same time stay independent? And I think this is a huge issue, largely because we are terrified of coming across as needy. And to get into a relationship, you have to take the risk. And without being needy and opening yourself up to rejection, you're never going to get into a relationship. So if you want to find love, I'm afraid the first step is taking a risk. And the risk is that you let somebody know that you are interested and that you like them. Now, this happens to be a really good thing because it builds your confidence. The more we are ourselves, the more confident we become. So it's a really good thing. But I don't think you can have both. If you really want a relationship or even a really close friendship, you have first to take that risk and allow yourself to be needy. And in fact, probably the best friendships, the best relationships have dependence in them, that you trust and depend on that person, and that makes it very good. So the second question I have here is, what is love and how we keep it? So what is love? Well, it's an interesting question. I suppose we often mistake infatuation for love, and we think that heady passion and interest in the early days of a romantic relationship is what love is. But it's not how we keep it. And if we really want love to grow and we want it to last, then we're going to have a lot more basic things in it. So children say, for friendships, they require kindness, fairness, and loyalty. And I would say for a romantic relationship, we probably want to include lust. We need our partners to be kind to us. If there's no kindness, we're not going to stay. Even if there's a lack of kindness in private life and not in public life, it's very hard to stay. If they're not kind to us, if they don't care about us, if they don't show us attention and affection, it's unlikely to last. And then there is the idea of fairness, and this is a really important idea. So in children's relationship, you expect your friend to pick you for things. You expect them to treat you well, that if you go over to their house, they come over to your house. And in the same way, in relationships, fairness is really important. We need to feel that there's some sense of fairness here. So if I, say, travel to another country for your career, that sometime later I can expect the same thing from you or some grand gesture from you. So that fairness is very important, and it does show up in many small things. For example, housework. That often the arguments about housework have underneath it the idea that there's a lack of fairness. And then there's loyalty. And loyalty for us means that I trust the other person puts me first. This doesn't always mean fidelity. So for example, in same-sex relationships, it's that I know the other person will put me first, even if they have sexual relationships with other people. And we need to trust that when push comes to shove, the other person will choose me over anyone else. And then of course there's lust, attraction, desire, feeling that the other person really wants you is really important, and also having that sense of connection is really important. So in a way, if you get beyond that first passion, how do you keep it going are these things. How do you ensure it stays going are these things. And there was a very large survey done in the UK called Enduring Love in the 21st Century. And most people said that kindness was the most important thing, companionship, that you wanted your loved one to be your best friend as well. So these are the ways that we value, how we see relationships and how we want to keep them going. So here's another question. Fighting causes so much trouble. How do we fight better? And I think that's a great question. So we fight because we care. So we are willing to get into an argument because we care about the other person. And generally speaking, we want them to hear us out. However, wonderful research by John Gottman shows that 69% of all couple arguments are never resolved in the course of their life together, which means that you could spend 30 years together and you're still arguing about the same thing. And it doesn't matter. What seems to matter is how you fight. So if you engage in fighting with a number of things which are explained in the book, things like criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or emotionally blankness, then that relationship is not going to work. So we need to learn how to fight better. And there is an argument that we need lots of affection. So that if you're going to have a fight with somebody that you love, that you tell them first, this is not going to break us up. And maybe if you have incredible courage, you agree that you will have a hug afterwards. But affection is really important, that we fight with affection and with humour or lightness, so that we don't go to the nuclear button all the time, that we don't think, oh, this is a breakup point. We think we have our whole lives to work this out, and we may never actually work it out, but we will do it, and we'll engage with it, and we'll, kind of have a go at it all the time. However, there are situations where fighting replaces intimacy. And this is because fighting is such an intimate thing to do. If you're fighting with somebody, you have their undivided attention. Even if you are not talking to them, you have the other person's undivided attention. So fighting can become a replacement for intimacy, and that is not a good thing. I really think that if that's happening, then instead of engaging in the fighting, you probably need to engage in more intimacy and more affection, and then see how you can manage the other stuff. Okay, so here's a question, I think, from a younger person. If it's someone I already know, how do I start a relationship? So I suppose it's obvious, I think. You have the guts to say it. And the problem here is the fear of rejection. The fear that if you expose yourself as liking somebody, or maybe you've separated and you fancy a neighbour, you can't start a relationship without somebody taking the risk. And that requires a lot of confidence. That's faith in yourself, that you think that you're worth it, that you're worth taking this challenge for. And then you have to let it go, because the other person can say yes or they can say no. And it's not up to you. You can't know beforehand. So you take the risk. And if you do take the risk, you grow in courage and in confidence. And you allow them. Maybe the timing is wrong. It's not that you're wrong. That person might be a very good option for you and for both of you, but they have their stuff. So take the risk, allow that you might be hurt, but also allow that it is still the right thing to do and that you grow in confidence. And if you survive it, you'll be able to do it again. So here's another one. I don't mix with people I might desire. So how do I connect up? These days, the answer is the internet. We would like to be able to connect up with people naturally, maybe by going to clubs or dances. But the truth is that the internet is probably the easiest way, and it's probably the most used way now for starting dating. Lots of great advice about how to set up a profile, what to look out for, how to get that going. So I would really encourage it. It's hard, it takes time, it takes commitment, and if you don't give it that time and commitment, it's not going to be successful. But for most people who do, and who stick with it and are willing to learn from it, they do end up finding people that they are attracted to and may become serious partners with. So this question, I suppose, is a bit more serious. I'm in a relationship with someone with mental health difficulties. How do I cope? Now, this is difficult because the danger is that you as the partner can become the carer, and that means that a lot of the romantic ideas can go out the door. So it's very important that your partner, your loved one, gets mental health support from doctor, counsellors, wherever they might get it, so that you can become, I suppose, not just a support, but also a romantic partner for them. It may take time, because somebody with mental health difficulties need a lot of input, and until they can feel confident and brave enough to move out again. So patience would be very important. I suppose love lasts a long time, and love is incredibly strong. And if you have faith, you can survive this. The other person, if they get the right help, will definitely come out of it. And then your relationship can evolve to a new level. But do be careful about becoming the carer, because that means that the romantic aspect is not there. How do I get my partner to commit? Well, I don't know if you can. I think there's lots of fear of commitment that exists in our world, and we need to allow people to understand that themselves, to see what their fear of commitment is about, and to understand the effect that has on their lives. So commitment gives us freedom. Like if we want to run a marathon, we commit to going out training every day, and then we get freedom of our bodies. If we commit to the job, we have success in the job. So commitment actually is freedom. We commit to a friendship, we call that person, we meet them once a week, the friendship thrives. So the fear of commitment, it's often about untangling what that fear is about. Fear of future regret, fear of loss of choice in the future. But it's usually fear that we're dealing with. So it might be very helpful to have discussions about that with that person. But if in the end that other person can't overcome their fear of commitment, you have to let them go, because they're the ones who have to do that work. However, I do think with love and attention, you can talk to them about it, you can pull the threads on it, but you have to use your intelligence to see what actually is happening. So, I kind of a related question to this is, I am in a relationship with a very jealous person. What do I do? I suppose, a relationship goes beyond the jealousy. So you're in a relationship with the whole person, with all the other lovely characteristics that they have and everything. But the jealousy can be very difficult to manage. And jealousy is always fear. So it's the fear. So they're jealous because they fear that you might find somebody else more attractive. They fear you going out with friends because you don't want to spend time with them. So you must realize that it's their problem and not yours. Therefore, your behavior can't fix it. You not going out with anybody, you not wearing something is not going to fix their jealousy. It's their issue and they have to deal with it. It is fear, so getting angry at them is not going to help. But you have to realize that it's up to them and it's not up to you to fix it. So you can show, loyalty and care and kindness, but you can't change your behavior in order to fix that fear because it's not going to work. They need help with it. And the chances are you're probably not the right person to fix it for them. They probably need some counselling to help them untangle what it's all about. Okay, a common one. I'm in love with my partner, but I love my partner, but I'm no longer in love with them. Again, I think this is common. That people really like their partners, they share the same principles, lots of shared life experiences, but they don't have that in-love feeling anymore. I think it can happen that people fall out of love. It's kind of like they don't have sex anymore, they don't have that romantic involvement, and yet they really care about each other. I think what we often do is we hang around the edges of the relationship, waiting for something to happen, waiting either to be propelled into it or propelled out of it. We can do something about that. If that in-love feeling, if that sense of intimacy has disappeared, now is the time to do something about it. Now is the time to actually talk to the other person, to really, really, really connect with them, to say, can we try touching each other again? Can we try, creating that lovely feeling? Yes, it's a risk. Yes, it's nerve-wracking, but it's worth trying before you give up on it. Otherwise, what will happen is that an affair will happen, something will happen to derail the relationship, and then you're dealing with it in a crisis with anger and rage, whereas all along both people have been contributing. So the I love you, but I'm not in love with you is a really big issue. And it's that like going around the edges, not committing for ages until something happens. So if you see it happening, do tackle it. Create intimacy simply by bringing it up. I resent my partner's lack of doing housework. I think this is true even for people living in a flat or house sharing. The reason it's important and the reason we get so angry at this is that we see it as, it's about how does the other person view me? Do they value me enough? Or do they mistreat me in some way? So believe it or not, things like, you never wash the sink can be such an intense fight because somehow it's an argument about fairness. How do I trust you to value me properly? So I think what we often need to do is think about, actually we need to get into the real argument. What are we really talking about here? Is it really about the sink or the dishwasher? Or is it really about, how do I know I'm valued? How do I know that you are fair and that you value me and you see me as somebody wonderful? So I think that's why those arguments are really important, except that we should be arguing about the right thing and not the wrong thing. I earn much more than my partner, and they think we should share everything. So money is power. We can't get away from it. And how we decide how money works often is a mirror for how power works in the relationship. Really important to talk about it. I think most of us hate having money conversations, mostly because we don't have enough or we feel guilty about how we're spending it. But I do think it's a really important thing to figure out. So if there's resentment, then it will fester, and unless you talk about it, unless you figure it out, unless you have some way of thinking about it fairly, then it is going to fester, and it will turn up in arguments, and it'll turn up at other times. So it's a really important thing to discuss. And I often think, hard and all as it is to do, you might want to have a money talk, I don't know, on the first Monday of every month. So you've already got it scheduled, you're already going to have it, you know when it's happening, and it might, deal with a lot of this issue. But money is power, and we need to be very conscious of that. It's not nothing, it's actually quite important. Okay, my partner has had an affair, and how do I trust them? With great difficulty. Affairs are common, they happen for numerous reasons. So affairs can happen because somebody is having a life crisis, because they're bored with their lives. But it can also happen because people have drifted apart. It can be a surprise. They find themselves in the arms of somebody else, that the love is actually gone. The relationship could actually be over. But most people do not react with ending. Most people see it as a crisis and they engage with it as opposed to going, that's it, I'm out of here. So it's very often an opportunity for relooking at the relationship, for finding out and pulling it apart. What happened? How did it happen? So when an affair happens, usually there is somebody who's had an affair. It's always hidden and secret. And then there is the other person who feels victimized, angry and upset. And it takes time to get over that. So the emotions are so high and so strong. But the affair can offer, a chance to get back into that relationship and really look at it. Maybe recommit, maybe really change, maybe decide that I choose my partner and this is how it's going to be and we're going to constantly work at this. Or it might be the beginning of an end. But how that end happens can be very damaging for children, for families, for communities. So we often need a lot of help, and I would suggest that anybody going through this really needs help. A counsellor, a mediator, somebody that you both trust that might help you through it. Because the hurt and the damage can extend for years, and we all know somebody that's still suffering years and years later. But it's not always the end. And I'd like to say that because I think many people use it, painful and all as it is, as a way of re-establishing and re-getting into that relationship. And again, leading on from that is, I'm separated. How do I get back into relationships? With great difficulty. Because it feels that everybody else has the skills and the knowledge how to do it and you don't. And it feels, like you're new in this, and yet you're an older person and you have all this experience. But the truth is, there's loads of other people like you out there that are lonely, that would love companionship, that would love some sex and desire and connection. And this is really important. So have the courage, talk to other people, go online, start trying it out, and you will find that it's wonderful. So then to come into the sex part of our relationship, so many people lose it. So many people don't have any sex in their relationships. Many people have lots of intimacy in spite of that. They talk about it, they show lots of affection and love. But other people don't talk about it because they worry that it's causing pain to their partner. And so it goes on for years and people feel quite sad and So I would say that sex is something that's very important. It can really bring joy and connection and fun and disaster and all the things that it might bring. But it's worth engaging with it. And very often, couples that do bring up the topic, that talk about sex, that actually say, listen, how are we getting on with this? What do we want to do? Is it, the same as it always was? Has desire changed? Has it fluctuated? It's an incredibly intimate thing to do. And I do think that it gets through the bad times. So often we're so stressed, we're so busy, so much going on, that the idea of having sex can feel like the last thing we want to do. And yet, if we stop, we can lose it. And it's very hard to get that connection back. So if that describes your relationship, it is worth asking. It is worth the conversation. I worked with a couple once, and the man was incredibly sad because he hadn't had sex with his wife for 30 years. And he was heartbroken. And when she heard it, she said, I thought it was you. I thought you didn't want it. And so they kind of discovered, 30 years of nothing. But actually, once they started talking about it, they got it back very quickly. So, it takes courage. Often it's a sign of protection and love that you're not going to ask your partner about it. But I think it's really important. Now, along with that, we have to talk about porn, because it plays such a big role in our lives. Very few of us talk about it. It's often done in secrecy, and yet it plays out in our relationships. Our children need us to talk about it so that they can trust that we're able to talk about it. So porn is a really important thing for us to discuss. We all have desires. Some of those we feel are a bit off or a bit weird, but actually human desire comes in all shapes and sizes. And I do think it's important that we allow that we allow our fantasies to exist. But some porn can offer difficulties in a relationship, because one person might be saying, look, I'm not troubling you, I'm going online late at night, but of course it has an effect. So again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I do think we need to talk about it. Anyway, you have the courage to talk about it, not just agree with people, but be able to own whatever it is we feel, so that it can become part of what we're talking about and not simply be a block and an unspoken thing. So finally, I suppose what I'd like to say about relationships is that if you're in one and have managed to survive in one, you're probably a very evolved human being. Relationships require sacrifice from us. We have to give up our own desires. We have to put somebody else first. We have to be generous, and it's a really, really good thing for us to do. If we manage to stay in a relationship and it's still good, we've probably tackled it. We've probably made ourselves very vulnerable, and that makes us better as human beings. So people in long-term relationships live longer. They tend to live happier. For many people, simply being in a relationship means that they're healthier because they get the advice of somebody else. So it is worth doing. It is worth really engaging with. But also, I think we can learn. We don't have to have previous knowledge. We can learn from other people's experience. We can learn from research, and we should use that learning, because otherwise we're blundering on, often without realizing how easy it is to have joy, happiness and connection in our lives. So I hope you enjoy the book, and again, love to hear your stories, love to hear what other people are doing and the advice and wisdom that you get from your own experience. So thank you for listening.